let's talk a little bit about history in order to understand the nature that led up to the protests. So, Kazakhstan, as you probably know, was part of the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, Kazakhstan actually had a relatively peaceful separation. There was some violence, but compared to other nations that separated themselves from the Soviet Union, in Kazakhstan, this separation was done mostly peaceful. It was done through negotiations and debates. And because of that, the people didn't really purge most of the communist guard, if you will, the people who were in power during the Soviet Union. Many of them managed to maintain their jobs, and the regime didn't really change. So the people right now who are protesting, many of them view responsible the current people in power in Kazakhstan also for the things that happened under the Soviet Union. Now, because of that, the situation is very similar to what it is in Eastern Europe. Many people in Kazakhstan are blaming all the social ills and the problems that are happening in their country on corruption. People that are very old who are clinging to power and are using nepotism in order to promote their own interests at the detriment of the people. And this old guard, if you will, has been entrenched so deep into the power structure of Kazakhstan that they can't be unseated. So as you can imagine, most people wanted something new. They wanted change. And officially, they managed to get that change in 2019. You see, for decades, ever since Kazakhstan managed to break away from the Soviet Union, they had the same man at the helm, a man by the name of Nursultan Nazarbayev. He has been president since the 90s, all the way up until 2019, when the people managed to elect a new president, a man by the name of Kassym Tokayev, which is now the de facto president of Kazakhstan. So the question is, if they got change, why are they upset? Well, what really triggered the event is not really the gas prices, which we're going to go to them in a bit. What really got people livid is the fact that in a recent talks between Kazakhstan and Russia, instead of Putin meeting with Kassym Tokayev, which is the actual president and representative of Kazakhstan, he met with Nursultan Nazarbayev. Why? Because Nursultan Nazarbayev, even up until recently, was still having a very important position within the government. He was the Chief of Security Council. Now, the Chief of Security Council isn't just an honorary title or a job that's only important during war. No, he is the leader of the defense force, and he is the leader of the secret services in Kazakhstan. So you can see the optics with how it's like when Putin decides to meet with him rather than meeting with the actual president. So the people were absolutely livid about this. And what triggered the event, and this is something that you will see in Eastern Europe a lot happening, like people are really upset about something, but this something is too complex to explain in one sentence, and it usually has been happening for decades, like corruption, for example. And you get an event which triggers the people. You get like this little spark that's insignificant on its own, but when you look at the grand scale of things, it causes an explosion. And that was the raising of the gas price. And this is why a lot of political analysts don't really understand. It's like, hold on a little bit, like the gas price was lowered, why are people still protesting? It's because they weren't really protesting about the gas price. They were livid with the government, they were livid with corruption, and this was just a thing which got people on the street. And this is why it doesn't make sense if you just look at the gas prices. Because sure, the gas prices doubled in value, but compared to Romania, they're about the same now. And the wages in Kazakhstan are also comparable to the wages in Romania. In fact, sometimes they might even be higher. They also have higher purchasing power than in Romania. So if you're just focusing on the gas prices, it doesn't make sense why so many people are in the street. And once you get enough people on the street, more and more start joining, to the point where you can have something which is what's happening in Kazakhstan right now. And you can see proof of this as many people are holding signs or they're writing with graffiti on the walls the message, "Time to go, old man." They're talking about Nursultan, and they want the change. They want the old regime to finally go because they view it as way too entrenched into every single position of power, and nothing can move in Kazakhstan unless the old guard allows it. At least that's what the people are viewing, and that's why they're protesting. And I don't think anyone expected the protesters to be disorganized and to be this many, because they managed to take soldiers captive, they managed to burn the house of the president, and the situation became so untenable that Russia sent peacekeepers to Kazakhstan. Now, the question is, why is Russia interested in Kazakhstan? And there are several reasons for this. Number one is that, most of the protesters don't seem to like Russia very well, so the relationships with Russia would deteriorate if the protesters manage to win. Secondly, if you look at Kazakhstan, it's the world's number one producer of uranium. And when you look at what people are talking right now, both in the European Union and in the United States, it's all about climate change. So the solution to climate change, despite the fact that many people are claiming it's going to be wind and solar, there are talks, especially in the United Kingdom, in Eastern Europe, and in many other nations where countries want to go nuclear. And in order to go nuclear, you need uranium. So obviously, just like China controls the lithium, Russia wants to control the uranium. So they are definitely not happy if you would have a Russia-unfriendly regime within Kazakhstan. Now, some people are suggesting that this is the West doing things, and they're trying to manipulate the people of Kazakhstan in order to rebel and to have this conflict. Many people that I know don't think that this is the case, because it wouldn't be this effective. I mean, the only way you can get so many people on the street, and the only way you can have such large protests, is if the people themselves genuinely had grievances towards the previous administration. I mean, the people definitely were upset with the way things were going in their country, so this is the real reason they're on the streets. It doesn't make sense that the European Union or the United States would be able to actually incite and foment in a short amount of time such animosity towards the regime. Now, with that said, does the US and the European Union profit from this? Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there's another problem that Putin has to deal with. He's now has to maintain focus on this area and is probably going to have less focus on Ukraine. The West does benefit from this, but just because the West benefits from this doesn't mean they're naturally involved in everything. So there's also, besides the immediate economic reason with uranium, you also have the Cosmodrome, which exists in Kazakhstan. This is the place where the Russians, one of the places that the Russians are exploring space. And this is another area that they would prefer to keep. I think even NASA used it a couple of times. It's a very significant area where many nations have launched spaceships to the skies. And again, this is another industry which might see development in the future. And now with the United States having its own space force, it's also an important strategic point, because, how it was in World War II, who controls the skies controls the land. Well, now who controls the satellites controls the sky, controls the land. So it's also an important national security issue. But right now, from what I can tell, and the information is very murky because, again, it's difficult to find out what is happening in Kazakhstan. There are three main groups that are struggling for power. You have the one that's currently in office, the President Kasim Tokayev, which is leading the negotiations from a position of strength. And then you have two more groups, which shows that the protesters were unable to solidify a leadership, and it's going to be bad for them because they're not going to be able to come from a position of strength at the negotiation table. And everyone expects things to die down and return to normal after these negotiations. Now, it does depend on what the protesters are going to be getting, and it also does depend on what crackdowns are going to ensue, because obviously the people in power do not want a second protest, so it wouldn't be surprising if a couple of years in the future you'll see some protest leaders get arrested for tax evasion or for jaywalking or for whatever reason. They suddenly get arrested, Secret Service starts following to see what they're posting online and that type of activity, which is very common for things happening in Eastern Europe, and it seems to also translate into other nations like Kazakhstan. And this is probably due to the fact that nations under the thumb of the Soviet Union do follow similar patterns. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.